My name is Ari. I work in the Cloud Provider Software Business Unit at VMware. We're a team that is dedicated to building software that our network of cloud provider partners use. So think vCloud Director, Cloud Provider Pod, Cloud Provider Hub, vCloud Availability, Usage Insight, all of that. Before we get started, I know there are a lot of great sessions out there happening at this time, so sincere thanks for being here. Really, really appreciate it, and I hope I can do justice to your expectations. In the next 30 minutes or so, what I want to cover is, a broad, let's just say, broadly we want to cover VMware's strategy towards multi-cloud, how we believe that as cloud transitions from product to platform to utility, we're beginning to understand that it's going to be an increasingly partner-driven model to the enterprise. And we'll share with you some of the innovations we're making in that space, and also shed some light on what the cloud provider partner is actually evolving to become, and the innovations that they can provide to you as enterprise IT customers. So, there are 4 things that I want to cover in detail in the next 28 minutes. Number 1 is essentially, well, you'd know this better than me, that multi-cloud essentially means the new silo in the data center. How there are different cloud deployments pretty much cropping up every other week in most of our enterprise IT customers' environments, and how they are creating silos that don't necessarily talk or interop with each other. Just want to share some data points on that, maybe get your insights on what's happening, and add credence to the argument that multi-cloud is indeed difficult to manage. Secondly, we want to talk about how we're seeing the emergence of the multi-cloud expert, who essentially we call our cloud provider partner, and what they can deliver to you. And next, we want to talk about how we're seeing more and more of our enterprise customers come to us and tell us that they want to be able to move, both in terms of a mindset and in terms of operational viability, from deploying cloud endpoints to consuming turnkey services that spread across these cloud endpoints. And finally, I'll just talk about what managed services, like cross-cloud managed services, are there for you to leverage, and how VMware is enabling some of that. Cool. So, 3 key things on this slide, if I were to ask you to take away, is 1, if you see the longest bar on that chart, it essentially represents that the highest. Well, this was a survey done by IDC last year, and the tallest bar essentially represents that the most commonly used multi-cloud deployment today is a simple hybrid cloud. So it could be a VMware on-prem data center extended to a VMware Cloud Provider data center or another site, or it could mean 2 disparate cloud environments, such as say a native AWS environment and a VMware environment on-prem. The second thing is that if you see the weighted average number there, it's actually fairly representative of what's happening today. Like even at VMware, we use maybe 8 to 10 different clouds. We have VDC, like vCloud Director-based virtual data centers. We have some stuff running on AWS. We have some hosted on-prem infrastructure. So multi-cloud really is pretty much the new norm. And finally, this number is just going to keep going up. There's no turning back. We have been seeing a little bit of a repatriation of workloads coming back from cloud to prem, and I will shed some light on our thesis as to why we see that happening. Cool. So fundamentally, VMware, a majority of our business is still vSphere based, but we are beginning to realize that there's a vast world outside vSphere, and that is going to keep growing, as it should. And we don't expect you as a business to run your analytics or or ML on necessarily on vSphere applications. You can go to GCP, you can go to Oracle for your databases. If you have a large repository of say customer data that you want to offload somewhere, you can go to S3. So there are a lot of different cloud environments with each having their own specialty. But what our customers are coming back and telling us is that each of these cloud endpoints is becoming very, very difficult to manage as an entity. So there's single sign-on difficulties, there's different CI/CD pipelines, there's different environments, different languages, and they need a partner in the cloud or at least a management platform that obfuscates some of this complexity across all of these clouds. So, cloud endpoints are essentially becoming increasingly siloed. Like I said, this is like the storage network and compute silo happening all over again. What you had in your data center maybe 5-6 years back is happening and is going to happen with cloud platforms is what we are seeing. So, to rectify this problem, we are seeing a lot of these startups and larger companies, our own actually, come up with a single pane of glass management platform that works across clouds. But the key thing to remember is that a cloud management platform is only as good as the APIs that it leverages, right? No matter how much you do with a cloud management platform, it's only going to be as good as the lowest common denominator across clouds. With all due respect to cloud management platforms, we have several of our own, which are really good, but there are inherent limitations in building on top of APIs of different cloud services and trying to create a common single pane of glass management platform. The difficulties are much deeper than management, and that's something that enterprises are coming to us and asking us to solve. There are certain enterprises that are going the other way. They're saying that, look, I will just focus on one vendor, be it AWS, be it VMware, be it GCP, and have all my workloads run on that. Now, obviously, that leads to vendor lock-in. You're at the mercy of their costing, their strategic direction, and that necessarily involves a lot of risk, right? Which is why a lot of enterprises that run, say, on vSphere or just on native AWS, we're seeing that there are rogue teams who are developing on unauthorized cloud platforms. And that's going to come up regardless of whether it's mandated by the business or not. And finally, what our customers are telling us is that, hey, give us a way through technology or through partnerships so that we can run our infrastructure seamlessly, be an engine to the business, add value, but not be disruptive. We essentially want seamless operations, serviceability at a super low cost, where I have visibility into operations, into cost models, into, I need predictability on the bill at the end of the month. And all of that has to have a future focus. So I don't want to lock myself into technologies that don't necessarily have a future. And this is difficult. And this is something that, again, a single pane of glass management platform may not be able to do. So this is where we're seeing a new market evolve, right? What we're calling the cloud provider market. So what they do is they take on the complexity of multi-cloud themselves, and you still have a single point of entry to multi-cloud as an enterprise IT customer. So this could be your cloud service provider. It could be your telco provider. It could be your managed service provider. It could be your systems integrator, systems outsourcer, whatever. So there's essentially a market that's conglomerating all of these entities into multi-cloud specialists. So interestingly, if you listened in on our earnings call last week, VMware as a company, we grew about 12.5% year on year. But if you paid attention to our cloud provider business, that grew 30% year on year on hundreds of billions of dollars base revenue. So why is that? I mean, our cloud provider partners were, the market perception seems to be that they're not much more than vSphere hosters, right? Here's my vSphere environment, please go manage it for me. But the cloud provider environment is becoming increasingly distributed, increasingly service-oriented, and increasingly multi-cloud, hence the title of the session. We are seeing enterprises who don't want to have 5 different backup vendors across 3 different clouds, going through hundreds of approvals from within and outside the company to be compliant, to be secure, and all of that. They transfer over the complexity to a cloud provider partner. And this complexity is essentially the bread and butter of this entity that you see in the middle. So we will dig a little deep into the kind of managed services that one can expect from the cloud provider partner. But this is the way, VMware, at least we're seeing our 500,000 customers going. So the other key thing that I want to mention was enterprise IT teams particularly, they want to prevent cloud sprawl within the company. And they want to move away from deploying different cloud endpoints to consuming managed services across these endpoints. A good example of that is one of our partners, Rackspace. So they helped a journal publication entity called British Medical Journal to expand their offerings into China. And they did it in a really, really seamless and very, very profitable way. The case study is public. What they essentially did was, so BMJ was expanding their offering, like their core repository of journals into China. On top of that, they would also integrate some new CI/CD pipelines on AWS. So they did not want to disrupt the agility that they had already started building out, but also wanted to move to a new environment. And they were VMware customers, so they had a lot of infrastructure on-prem that they wanted to move away from. Right? So Rackspace came in, and they took a very, very business-focused approach. So what they did was, firstly, Rackspace is the world #1 AWS managed service provider, by the way. So they took away the complexity of managing BMJ's 3 different endpoints. And what they did was they provided an asset-light hosting service for their VMware-based environment. They integrated the AWS environment, and they helped BMJ set up an Ali Cloud environment in China so that they had local presence and local availability in that new geo. And to us, this was a big deal because not only did they provide cloud migration, they provided asset-light hosting, they provided cross-cloud management, and they did all of this non-disruptively. So to us, this was a fine example of how a cloud provider empowered the IT team at BMJ to enable a completely different business, a completely different revenue driver for BMJ. So this is one of the many case studies that we're seeing come up increasingly in the cloud provider market. So cloud providers are just so much more than single pane of glass management platform. You can approach a cloud provider, well, first of all, to offload some of your on-prem infrastructure, but you have across your cloud environments, you have single terms of service, you have one bill, you have single point of subscription and usage, you have deep visibility into operations, you have true multi-cloud expertise for the cloud providers. We need to remember that this is the core business of the VMware cloud provider partners, VMware or non-VMware cloud provider partners actually, that they have deep expertise on cross-cloud security, on cross-cloud migration, cost optimization, and a lot more. And this is something that really requires a business-oriented entity and not just a product, right? So essentially, our network of cloud provider partners help you, the enterprise IT teams, to embark on your multi-cloud journey in a simplified single point of entry manner. You're moving away from deploying infrastructure, deploying platforms, building software to consuming turnkey IaaS, PaaS, SaaS services. So really, think of the partner as your single point of entry to multi-cloud. And the market is still forming. It's, like I said, we are growing as a business 30% year on year. on a very large revenue base. So there are early signs that this is going to take off, and this is the way the market is headed. So let's talk about some services that our cloud provider partners offer. Let's start with DR, for example. We all know that hardware outages and in general outages happen. It's inherent of any technology, right? But what is in the IT team's control, as we have seen, is whether or not it disrupts the business of a company. So we work with the thesis that IT recovery needs to be absolutely invisible to the business. And this is something that our cloud provider partners take, they lead the market on this front, and we take great pride in that fact. So companies like Island and SunGuard and Armor, all of these guys, you'll see them repeatedly featured on Forrester Wave, Gartner Magic Quadrant, and all of these industry publications which rank services from cloud providers. We at VMware are really proud that their disaster recovery services are actually powered by our technology. So Site Recovery Manager, vCloud Availability, and all those disaster recovery software really powers the engine of these services that our cloud providers use. Now, beyond being invisible to IT, beyond being invisible to the business, it actually empowers our cloud providers, DR services empower the IT teams to have super granular control. So you have granular control on RPO, on RTO, on how much you want to pay for each service, which vendors you want to use, where your backup should be located. So it's fine-grained control, but without the complexity of managing it. And finally, during a recovery process, what they do is they take away the potential staff productivity drain that you would get. And the best part about it is because you're consuming it as a service, you can literally demand your SLAs from them. It's baked into your contract. So any company that has embarked on multi-cloud, cross-cloud cost optimization is probably top of mind for them. And there's two ways that cloud providers can help you deliver the most cost-optimized structure for your workload framework. Number one is that our cloud providers have, on an average, have thousands to tens of thousands of customers, and they know which workload sits where and how much that costs. So this data and this analytics enables them to deliver cost models that are hyper-optimized, regardless of which cloud you use. And that is one of their key value props. So there are certain cloud providers, say Accenture, for example, they have a cloud platform wherein you can literally log in, configure what your workload specifications are, and get a truly cost-optimized framework as to where you should be. So that's one thing. The second thing is, these cloud providers, they have the economies of scale. So they work with vendors such as ourselves, VMware, to negotiate contracts that are, let's just say, they get the benefits of pricing that as an enterprise IT team, you may not get from a large vendor. And some of these discounts and some of these contractual pricing, the benefits percolate down all the way to the customer. So just two ways as to how we see our partners delivering cross-cloud cost optimization for enterprise IT teams. Data protection is another decent example of how cloud providers are helping our enterprise customers move from deploying individual backup vendors, deploying cloud environments with individual backup vendors, versus just consuming cross-cloud backup as a service. So again, you have fine-grained control on which clouds, which geos, which availability zones you want to use, and eventually you get one bill that is super cost-controlled and super visible to you across all of these clouds. So probably the number one cloud inhibitor across any enterprise customer we talk to is security. And we see this every day, right? At least the ones that are publicly disclosed, we see. So statistics tell us that we face about a company of our size faces about between 100 to 200 malware attacks per day. Some of them are unfortunately successful. And it is impossible for a nascent IT team to deliver security across application architectures, across cloud endpoints, across geographies. So you want to leave some of that to someone who really understands it and does it as a business. So you'll see partners such as NTT, CenturyLink, Fujitsu. All of these guys are featured again regularly as in the leaders quadrant of the Gartner MQ, all the way from 2008 to 2017. This is actually one area where our partners literally have industry-leading specialization in. So what we're seeing more and more of vSphere customers do is move away from building security practices to providing, rather consuming security as a service from cloud providers, not just on their vSphere endpoints, but on any cloud endpoint, say native AWS or VMware Cloud on AWS or GCP, etc. So another really important consideration, for all cloud builders today is compliance. Majority of enterprises today are still out of compliance, and what we've heard our customers tell us is that, hey, I have no path to compliance today. I need to get compliant in the next 60 days. Help me out. So we refer them to a cloud provider partner. So some good examples would be Rackspace or Inferno. These guys have built out practices just dedicated for compliance purposes. So they come in, they provide education, they provide framework development. Sometimes they build out IT platforms which are compliant to local rules and regulations. And finally, they lifecycle manage the whole thing. Now, it could be expensive, but what happens is it's like an insurance policy. You would rather pay a monthly premium versus be non-compliant and pay a hefty penalty of tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. So not just that, cloud providers actually have a voice in developing compliance practices, be it by industry verticals or by geography. So for example, if you're an enterprise IT team for a hospital chain somewhere in Norway, there is we actually have a cloud provider who specializes in exactly that, compliance for healthcare in Nordic regions. So we take pride in the breadth and depth of our ecosystem, and we believe that compliance and security and connectivity, all of these services can be delivered at a level of class and performance that not all enterprise IT teams will be able to provision themselves. And I could really go on and on about services. Cloud providers, whether our partners or not, are increasingly moving to multi-cloud. And what we're seeing is that maybe a few years back, even VMware Cloud Provider partners used to be looked at as vSphere hosters. So lift workloads off of your prem and shift them onto their prem or a co-located space, or AWS or Azure resellers. So the margins in those practices are consistently shrinking, which necessitates them to develop cross-cloud practices where they deliver increasingly higher amounts of value. So I guess the key message is, the next time you want to build out a different cloud endpoint or build out new infrastructure, consider, shifting your mindset to something that's consumption-based, rather than trying to, build out something that could take potentially months of effort and still not be secure or compliant. And this is a market that's still evolving, like I mentioned earlier. So with respect to multi-cloud, it's still a very good time to get in. Because once this market matures, you will again have consolidation and again be beholden to prices and potentially get locked into to one or two large vendors. So maybe a few quick minutes on how VMware is involved in empowering the cloud provider. So originally, like I said, the cloud provider was seen as a route to vSphere hosting. But with the innovations that we're making in the cloud provider platform, what we're doing is helping cloud providers deliver managed services across different cloud endpoints. Now, how do we do this? There's two key pieces to this. So our technology framework for cloud provider partners is called the VMware Cloud Provider Platform. And it has a VMware component and a non-VMware cloud component. So if you're a cloud provider that's hosting VMware-based workloads, we've introduced the Cloud Provider Pod, introduced efficiencies in vCloud Director, NSX, vSAN, vSphere. You'll hear all about it in the next week. But those are all innovations to deploy your VMware-based cloud in a matter of a few hours. The Cloud Provider Pod, I will talk about that in a second, is an automated cloud deployment tool that helps you get service ready in a matter of hours, a process that would, up until a few months back, used to take weeks, potentially months. The Cloud Provider Hub is when we help our cloud providers step out of their VMware environment into a multi-cloud space. So the Cloud Provider Hub is essentially a platform through which cloud providers can consume VMware cloud service offerings, such as log intelligence, costing offerings, VMware Cloud on AWS, and so on, and deliver services on top of that. We're also building out a marketplace where we have ISV partners, think of backup, think of DR, security, from third-party vendors who will be featured on the hub, and those services could be leveraged by a cloud provider to manage and provide, again, turnkey security, turnkey compliance, turnkey DR, turnkey backup, data protection, all of those services. So I spoke about Cloud Provider Pod a little bit. Essentially, it's a cloud deployment tool. It helps you build a cloud of your choice. So you could, if you don't want hyperconverged, for example, you can choose not to use it. If you have custom networking equipment, you can just configure it the way you want. And it deploys that entire stack in one click in a matter of a few hours. Now, the beauty of the pod is that the resulting stack that you get from your custom design is interoperable, and it's performance and scale tested for cloud environments. So what you essentially get is reliability and interoperability from a custom design stack. And this has not been done by VMware before. Oh, also, the Cloud Provider Pod generates operations guidance, service monetization guidance, design guidance specific to the cloud environment that you build. So it becomes sort of a one-stop shop for anything to do with your VMware cloud. The Cloud Provider Hub, again, is a SaaS-based offering where a cloud provider can integrate different services, be it VMware Cloud Services or in the future marketplace services, and expose those services based off of those to the end customer. So for example, if you're a cloud provider and you have a customer in the US and you have a data center in the US, that's great. Customer wants to move, expand their business into Europe. You don't have a data center in Europe. But guess what? VMware Cloud on AWS has an availability zone in Amsterdam. So they can consume VMware Cloud on AWS as an endpoint and use that as an extension of their own cloud. So now they can provide turnkey services, all of those things I talked about, on their cloud, as well as the VMware Cloud on AWS endpoint. And all of this is API-driven, so a partner can choose to expose UI if they want to, but our key objective with this platform is to integrate all of this service design capability into their platforms to make their offering more homogeneous but more powerful. So those are essentially the two pieces that we're working on to empower the cloud provider to deliver managed services. So where do you get cloud services? All of the stuff that I spoke about. We have a bunch of cloud verified partners across the world. They're cloud verified in the sense that they bear the entire VMware stack that is thoroughly interop tested and let's just say signed off on by VMware. But that's not the end of the story. We have a network of 4,000 cloud providers in over 100 plus countries. So chances are that wherever your business is or wherever your business is going to, you can definitely find a cloud provider there. So, to finish up, I guess what our mission is to empower the cloud provider to do more and deliver better services for you to leverage so that you don't have to necessarily invest in IT that is non-compliant and not future ready. So finally, I think if you're looking for a cloud provider partner or looking to consume services or even looking to deploy new infrastructure, I would highly recommend that you consider one of our 4,000 odd partners, all of them available at cloud.vmware.com/providers. And if you want to check out the innovations that we are building, if one of you is a cloud provider, do visit vcpp.cloud. VCPP stands for VMware Cloud Provider Program. We're making, so this, like by an order of magnitude, is the biggest VMworld for cloud providers that there has ever been. We're investing in the platform. We're making it more powerful, and you will see more innovations through the week. So I'll stop with that. Again, my name is Ari. If you have the time, if you enjoyed the session, or even if you didn't, please do fill out the survey. And once again, a lot of great sessions out there. Enjoy your VMworld, and thanks so much again for being here.